But why haven't you managed to sell the case? Why haven't you managed to convince the public about them? Why are you only doing this now?
Well, I think it's partly because sometimes we talk about these structures. Actually, what we won't be talking about, and I suspect all candidates on the doorstep, all Conservative Party candidates, are talking about what we have done to raise the attainment of our young people in this country.
All right.
As I say,
I mean, even the Prime Minister had to admit that free schools, quote, are not often understood.
Well,
that's a failure, isn't it?
I think it's not a failure of the policy, it's a failure sometimes
of your ability to sell it.
Well, we have to explain why we are doing what we're doing. All politicians have to do that. That's the whole point about election campaign.
Tristram Hunt,
yes. If I could come in on this.
Of course, all right.
One of the concerns with free schools is that there should be ways in which people can get involved in education, and there always have. There have been traditional ways in which you can do that, school governors or charitable trusts. And I think the thing about free schools is it looks like people who are saying, I want to come in and get involved in education, but not work with other people. And I think it's that sense in which too often it's seen that people are wanting to go off on their own and set something up rather than working with what's there already.
The free schools do give a good idea, that the idea of innovation in education, to give different types of schools. I've got no problem with that idea, and I think Nicky is absolutely right to want that in principle. The problem has been putting that into practice, where they've become little more than another way of bringing in the same old, and they haven't got that kind of innovation that we desperately need in our education. Different types of schools.
It isn't the case, because 17% of free schools, for example, deal with special needs or alternative provision. That's children who need additional help. Right. Actually, what they're doing is they are raising standards. And I would challenge any of the panel to go and visit a school like the Fulham Boys School or the Sikh Free School in Leicester. They are full of dedicated professionals who are doing brilliant work for the children in them.
Many of these free schools are excellent, but they do rely upon the quality of leadership and governance. And I think one of the problems
schools don't depend on that.
One of the problems that we've had in the English educational debate is a fixation on nameplates, when actually what matters is more concentration in all schools, whether they're local authority or not, on quality.
Tristram Hunt and then Brown one's coming in.
David, this is your record, and the Liberal Democrats can't run away from this. I'm very proud of it. You voted for unqualified teachers in our schools. You voted for the free schools programme. You haven't focused on the most important elements in education, which is the quality of teaching and the strength of leadership. And instead, you and the Conservative Party have obsessed about structural reform and not focused on what really matters, which is why the Labour Party is committed to having qualified teachers in our classroom, having professional development.
I understand that, and we'll come to that in a minute.
Supporting head teachers.
David Laws, respond.
Let me make 2 points. First is, we in government, partly because of Liberal Democrat influence, have actually taken forward the idea of a Royal College of Teaching, which is going to lead to better professional development for teachers in the future. And on this issue of qualified teachers, I actually believe that all teachers should be qualified.
Well,
Michael Gove made that change in government without agreement. He was able to do so because the last Labour government passed legislation that enabled that. But actually, the number of qualified and unqualified...
All right, let me come to Tristram Hunt
now as it was under Labour.
Let me come to Tristram Hunt on that, because you've complained about the rise in unqualified teachers. You said that a Labour government would get rid of them all. But if they're so bad, why do some of the best performing schools in the country employ them?
What we've said is that we want all teachers to be qualified or working towards qualified teacher status. And that's both a sign of the respect we attach to teachers. We think it is a demanding, fulfilling profession. We don't think, unlike the Conservatives and the Liberals, that anyone can just turn up and be a teacher. Actually, you need training, you need qualification.
I understand the case. What I asked you was, why do some of the best performing schools in the countries employ what you regard as unqualified teachers?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, you don't think they do?
I don't know which schools you're referring to.
There are many schools that employ them, including the school you went to.
Well, what we're saying is that whether it's in the independent sector, where the vast majority of teachers are qualified, around 90%, or whether it's in the state sector, we think, as a sign and symbol of the respect we give to teachers, and because, particularly for children from disadvantaged communities, the best thing that can happen for their education is to come in front of a great quality teacher. So it's not just about QTS. That's just a licence to teach.
QTS?
Is qualified teacher status.
Thank you.
What it is year on year the professional development and the support for the professional development of teachers. And that's why, on a cross-party basis, we support the College of Teaching. We think that's a good idea.
Brownman Jeffries, let me bring Brownman in here.
Mr. Hunt, you're saying that you would say to head teachers in some of those very deprived communities who are struggling to recruit teachers right now, that they couldn't bring in someone who was bright, who was a graduate, who could bring in experience maybe from industry, perhaps from working in a shortage area like science or maths? Are you saying they really shouldn't be using those people now?
No, of course they should bring them in.
So what's wrong with recruiting them in the future if they desperately need teachers in those areas?
Of course they should bring them in and then put them on a pathway towards qualified teacher status. And the reason why we've got such a teacher recruitment crisis is because the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats have talked down the teaching profession for the last 4 years. The blob, enemies of promise, the workload that's hit them. This is why, and you're absolutely right, Ram, across the country we have this terrifying prospect of not getting great quality teachers to underperforming areas. And this is as a result of the kind of
Let Brendan just have a follow-up, then I'll come to you, Nicky.
The assault we've seen on teaching from this government over the last
Okay, you've made that point, Brendan.
Just on numbers, if you look at the numbers, there were just as many unqualified teachers under Labour. Only slightly more, but 700 more. You know, so 700 more. But there was. If you look back over a decade,
what was the difference? The difference was that they were on a pathway towards qualified teacher status.
There is absolutely no difference in the figures. That's not the case.
That is the absolutely crucial difference. And under the next Labour government, look, we want great people to become teachers. We want the physicists, the musicians, the drama teachers, the out-of-work journalists to be able to come.
Why are you looking at me when you say that?
To come to be teachers, but we also want them to gain qualified teacher status.
Well, let me ask you this.
In the power and symbolism of teaching.
You made that point. What evidence can you provide us that shows that unqualified, as you regard them, unqualified teachers perform poorly in the classroom?
Well, right around the world, the most high-performing education systems, Singapore, Finland, put huge amounts of effort into the quality and the qualification and professional development of their teachers.
But what evidence can you give us in this country that what you regard as unqualified teachers are performing poorly?
So there's international evidence that having a highly motivated, highly qualified teaching cohort produces better results. And we also think...
What about this country? What's the evidence from this country? We have what you regard as unqualified teachers. What academic research can you provide that shows that they perform poorly in the classroom?
We know that having qualified teachers, and that's just the beginning, and then the professional development of teachers is much better for the results of young people. Now, you will always be able to find a brilliant teacher...
What's the research?
Hold on. You will always be able to find a brilliant teacher in a highly selective school with excellent subject knowledge, but I'm talking about the vast majority of schools in Britain, and we take the view that teaching is one of the most important elements, one of the most important professions, and we think...
I know what you think. I just wanted to know. I just wanted the evidence that backs it up, but I haven't.
There's international evidence.
I haven't had that. Nicky Morgan, you're demonising teachers. You make it that people don't want to come into teaching because of your attitude. What's the answer?
It's absolutely not the case. We absolutely respect professional, hard-working, dedicated teachers. I meet many of them at schools up and down the country. As Branwen, I think, was hinting at, only 3% of the profession or those teaching don't have qualified teacher status. But you asked about evidence. The evidence is that we have 1 million more children in schools rated good or outstanding. Ofsted show we've got more teaching that is good or outstanding than we had in 2010. We have, as David said, made plans to have a college of teaching. Tristram can't have it both ways. He can't both attack education and the profession and then talk about what he wants to. But the question you have to answer is the first thing he would do as Education Secretary tell 17,000 people that they cannot teach in our schools in this country? He would not do that.
Well, I want to bring in the Greens and UKIP, but briefly just can we answer that? I know you wouldn't do what Nicky Morgan suggested, but you would say that unqualified teachers should start getting a teaching qualification, correct?
Absolutely.
And if they refuse to do so, would they then lose their jobs?
Well, at the end of a parliament, if you're not qualified or working towards qualified teacher status, we don't think that you've shown the enthusiasm and the respect to your
So you should lose your job?
Yeah, you don't deserve to be in the classroom.
So you should lose your job?
If over the course of the parliament you're not either qualified or working towards qualified teacher status, if you're not on a pathway towards it, we don't think you should be in the classroom because you've got to be qualified.
You would fire them?
You've got to be improving.
You would fire them?
Yes, because we need high-quality teaching in our
No, I need to move on. And there are more than 3 parties here. I want to move on to UKIP. Jonathan Arnott, your party is to ensure a grammar school in every town. Can you explain how you would do that? Would they be new build grammar schools, or would you convert existing schools into grammar schools?
We're talking about a lot more than just grammar schools, of course.
No, but answer that particular point.
Yeah, we are talking basically about converting existing schools into grammar schools over a period of time, yes. And, of course,
can you just
other
explain
types
how
of
that would
schools
work?
as well, talking about vocational and technical schools.
So you would identify a school and you say, right, this one is a grammar school. What would happen to the children going there at the moment?
Look, of course, something like that has to be done over a period of time with a new cohort. It's something that would take a few years to go.
But what would happen to the children currently going to the school that you've designated as a grammar school?
As I said, it would only apply to a new cohort. It's not something, of course, that you could bring in and move children from one school to another. But schools have converted. Schools have converted from one kind of school to another kind of school many times in the past. And frankly, frankly, we're not talking about anything that's new. We're not talking about rocket science here.
It doesn't respect the outstanding schools that we see up and down the country. What we want is every school to be a good or excellent local school.
All right.
Of course, and in order to make sure that you've got that, we want different kinds of schools. We want more parental choice, and one of those ways of doing things is to have something which is aimed at those children who flourish in an academic environment. Just like you want some schools to flourish in a vocational environment or in a technical environment. What we want is an education system that meets the needs of all different types of children.
You've said that point. I want to... No, I've got to be fair. We've got to have hear from the Greens now as well. And I want to ask you this. Your manifesto wants to phase out private schools altogether. Could you name a single democratic country that bans parents from sending their kids to private schools?
That's not what we want to do. What we want to do is to take the charitable status away from private schools.
But you also want them to join the state system. You want to absorb them into the state system.
There are many excellent private schools, and we would like that resource for this country to be available to all, not on the ability to pay. If a school wants to continue without charitable status to offer private education, that's fine. It would be regrettable, but they would be free to do that.
So it would continue? So private schools could continue without charitable status?
Yes.
If they didn't want... OK, that's clear enough.
You've not change in your manifesto, have you?
How
much money would it cost?
Can I take your point first?
What about all the church-run schools? There are thousands of schools in this country run by the Church of England, the Catholic Church, other organisations. You also think public money should be taken away from those schools, which are supported by millions of parents?
We're not saying to take the money away in a sense of saying, we would just grab it. What we're saying is we would want faith schools to have an admissions policy and to integrate into the rest of the community education system. So if a school continues to have a relationship with a faith, that's fine, in the same way that when grammar schools come in, they could continue to offer some of the elements of a grammar school traditional education, the same ethos and so forth. But what's crucial is about access to these schools. If people are prevented from going to a school, it is divisive in communities. That's what we want to tackle.
You don't think churches should be running schools? Fundamentally, you do not think religious organisations should be running schools?
Because what we've seen is that the admissions criteria or the, if you might say, atmosphere as to whether people want to go to those schools or not becomes very divisive within communities.
So no Church of England schools?
We're not saying no Church of England schools or no church involvement or no faith involvement. What we're saying is that faiths should not run schools in such a way...
No Muslim schools?
In such a way...
No Jewish schools?
...as to have single faith education, because it's divisive.
So you would get rid of all that?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, sorry, within the state system.
Oh, I understand that. Well, at least that's a clarification. Nicky Morgan and Tristram Hunt and David Lodds, all three of you here, you either want to run or to run our state school system. So what does it say about British education that all three of you went to fee-paying schools?
Well, I don't want to run the education system. I want to devolve that power down to directors of school standards.
But it would still report to you. Now, why is it that all three of you who want to be the education secretary here and are most likely to be, of the five of you here, it's you three, one of you will probably get the job, that you all went to private schools and then to Oxbridge?
Well, I think there's been a tightening of the circle across many professions, journalism, law, medicine, the key element
continued under Labour.
Architecture. The key element is how do you widen social mobility? And when it comes to private schools, what we in the Labour Party are saying is that we would remove their business rate relief unless they collaborated and partnered with other schools. I think the private sector actually has a lot to learn from state schools. The teaching in state schools, when you strip out selection, is actually better.
So your answer to social mobility is to take away business rate relief? Is
no, our answer to social mobility is to invest in early years, because that's where you challenge inequality. And under this government, we've seen 750 Sure Start children's centres close.
All right, David Laws, what do you say to that?
Inequality rise under this government.
Let me hear from David Laws.
I agree with the point you're making. Sadly, too many of the professions in this country have a disproportionate number of people from the private school system, and that is a reflection of the fact that in our society we may think of ourselves as a meritocracy where people are judged on merit, but the chances of acquiring qualifications and merit are still hideously unequal. We still have almost 2/3 of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who don't even get the 5 C grade